brain work now as well as you can.
Bibliosophie.
Sacrifice made in the name of loving well.
Because I'm always so harsh about reviews.
Is that how you feel?
Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I've been wanting to do a vlog, but I've also not wanted to do a longer stretch of time, so I'm keeping it to 2, potentially 3 days. As with the last time I did a 48-hour reading vlog, this isn't about my attempt to read as much as possible over the course of 48 hours. This is not a marathon. This is simply just 48 hours of my reading life and maybe some various other sundries. So, what am I reading these days? I started Paradise by Toni Morrison a few days ago, and I am enjoying the writing, of course. As always, it is beautifully written. I'm also having a harder time wanting to dive back into it when I put it down. Hard is a little bit of an overstatement, but I'm not always wanting to get back to it. This is for 2 different reasons, I would say. One is structural, because we're following so many different threads and people. Something I love about Toni Morrison's writing is how much she leaves off the page, how much she allows the reader to do the digging and kind of figuring out of what's going on. She really plops us into action and into these people's lives and expects us to figure it out. I love this. It's also difficult, and especially in this case, because there are so many stories, that's some work for me to do. It's, I think, worthy work, but it's still work. The other reason I'm not always wanting to come back to this is that it's not a pleasant world to be in. This starts off with a lot of violence, with a huge bout of violence and abuse, and obviously racial tension and overt racism, domestic abuse. These difficult topics are generally topics that Morrison covers in her books, and I trust her to shepherd me through those topics beautifully, but they are hard to deal with. We're centering around an all-Black town which has created itself as a very isolated paradise, but it's very much an investigation of insiderness, outsiderness, what it takes to make a utopia, keep building and rebuilding a utopia. Who are the people who are in that utopia? Who are the people who are not in that utopia? I started also a few days ago this huge chunker of a biography of Susan Sontag by Benjamin Moser. I read about half of this book, I think 3 years ago, and just stopped. I started up again, not at the beginning, but when she's in her 30s, basically, around the time of the publication of Against Interpretation and such. And I've been liking, mostly, reading her life. I will finish it, I'm almost certain, this time around, because I'm actually pretty close to done with it. It's been interesting to get back to it. And finally, this morning, I started Hanif Abdurraqib's, what is it called? The basketball one. There's always this year. I have no particular interest in basketball, but Abdurraqib will make me read about anything. So if he likes basketball, I like basketball if he's talking about it. I love Hanif Abdurraqib's books. I love his voice, his literary voice, his writerly voice, and also his literal voice. I'm listening to the audiobook of this, and he narrates it, and it's beautiful. So I've barely started it, but so far, I'm liking it, and I suspect I will like it. My intended schedule for the day has been completely blown up, and that's fine. I was slower than maybe anticipated this morning. I'm always slower than anticipated, and I think I just have to deal with it. I've written a bit. I scheduled myself to do some dissertation writing at 10 o'clock, which just did not happen. So I will do that, I think, when I return from grocery shopping. I did some cleaning, which I had not scheduled for myself, and I'm very glad that I did. Actually, a pretty intense clean of my household because it needed it. My apartment is never particularly dirty or messy, and yet it always feels like it is too dirty and too messy. I think this is simply the reality of having a place to live in. It's the reality of being alive, it's the reality of being a body, and it's a reality of being a body in a space. That space is always fighting with the entropy of chaos. So I'm attempting to make my space a little bit, I don't know, friendlier to me. All right, enough yapping. I'm going to go on with my day. I'm overwhelmed with the task of turning notes-ish, kind of generative, keep writing, keep trying to get some idea through text into the proper stuff. I have been getting increasingly frustrated at the act of doing it. I've started it. I must simply just continue. The only way out is through. But even once I've started that process, it's not getting easier. It's just every sentence that I have to reconsider and reconfigure and maybe omit is torturous right now. I'm going to stop. I haven't accomplished that much writing, but I have accomplished a bit of writing. So little, but at least a bit. And that will be fine for now, and I will get back to it. I'm going to try to do another little bout of writing before the end of the day.
Or if we don't want any more things.
Hello, good morning. Today I have a lot of medical business to attend to. That's kind of all I'm planning to do. I will do my morning pages at some point soon, ideally, but I'm not planning on doing any dissertation writing today. Today does not need to be the day. I'm also, of course, bringing some books along with me. I have Paradise. I'm about halfway through at this point, and I am getting more into it. I read a chunk of it this morning, and as I kind of suspected I would, the more I get through reading it, the more I am learning its language, the more I find it easier and compelling to get back to. As I mentioned yesterday, part of the difficulty is just a large cast of characters who are also kind of semi-introduced, semi-not, and so it's harder to invest in them at the beginning, but that's changing. And these characters aren't necessarily lovable entirely, right? These are flawed characters, but I'm definitely much more invested in them than I was initially, which is quite normal. I am also bringing Limbo by Dan Fox. This is a book I read a couple of years ago and enjoyed. It's nonfiction Fitzcarraldo. It's a long essay on kind of the state of limbo. And I figured in my current state, which is a lot of waiting, I would be potentially interested in revisiting it. I'm also realizing that I have a lovely dichotomy of Paradise and Limbo happening. It's too bad that I don't have a copy of Dante's Inferno. I could have made a full trio of them. But yeah, so that's the plan for today. I'm actually going to get going now-ish. My friend brought me some New Year's tulips last night, and they make me very happy. I'm wearing a jacket, a full felt outerwear jacket under a coat today, and let me tell you, I am bulky. Done. I'm emerging from a brief fatigue and overwhelm tunnel, let's say, to speak again. It's been 2 days since last we saw each other. I started and finished Limbo while in my own waiting room limbo 2 days ago. And I'm glad I revisited this. I suspected that it would speak to me in my current state, both the kind of microcosm of my little life, but also more broadly, globally, politically. And it did. It was interesting to see what I underlined 2 years ago and what jumped out at me this time around. That's kind of the interesting part of revisiting a book, and especially if you've marked it, to trace kind of the map of your reaction to something. This is a part memoir and part series of essays, short essays on limbo as a cultural and political concept, in-betweenness, transience. And it was quite interesting. It was a fast read. It also has informed, as often happens, my reading of Paradise. And I've been thinking a lot about limbo or purgatory and paradise. I was writing about it earlier this morning, in fact. I'm really getting into the Paradise a lot more. I'm not quite done with it, but pretty close. And I have heaps of underlines in this as well. I won't go into all of them right now in this video. It seems like too much. But something that I'm really interested in is the time and place aspect of Paradise and of Limbo. The spatial aspect of building a paradise. In this case, Paradise is a series of places. It is the town of Ruby, which is the contemporaneous town. It is the town of Haven, which was a town built in 1890 and kind of is the precursor to the current Paradise town of Ruby. It's also a convent, or the convent, on the outskirts of Ruby, some miles away, and the refuge that it offers to its inhabitants. So it's a series of refuges, but it's also the action of making and keeping those spaces of so-called paradise. Paradise is infinite, and yet in this case, Paradise is always kind of in danger. This is very much a book about the encroaching danger of the outside, but also the danger of what comes from within. What are the actions of then telling a story, and how does that mix with time and space? And that's always, for me, the project of Toni Morrison in her books, and she has stated it herself. She's writing histories that are like oral histories. How does that intersect and interact with time and place in Paradise? It also, of course, interacts with the construction. So even kind of the time and place of the book, how time is understood in the book. We start in medias res, and then we're kind of jumping around between different people, different stories, different places. It is that kind of non-chronological aspect of the story, which makes it more like oral history in a lot of ways. When we tell a story, we're not perfectly giving this happened, then this happened, then this happened in a completely coherent way. And it also makes for a very interesting timelessness and untetheredness. I've been thinking a lot today about stability and stasis of Paradise, for instance. That's such an ongoing theme for the people of the town of Ruby, and especially an older generation, of how to keep things intact, how to protect Ruby by making it stable, by making it unchanged and unchanging. And of course, Ruby is a settlement. It is about being finally in a place and settling in that place. But it's also the story of Paradise is also full of unsettled people, and it's written in a sort of unsettled and unsettling way. So Morrison is kind of coyly playing with our own sense of truth and comprehension and legibility. She unwraps the story and makes us dig for the story to a certain extent. If you are reading this, I think a very helpful kind of key chapter, and by key I mean a chapter which kind of gives a key to the happenings of the book, is the Patricia chapter, but crucially it happens here. So we've already gone through a big chunk of the book before we're told about kind of more A to B to C, a lot of the history of the town. We're given a lot of glimpses of that history, but it takes a while to have kind of genealogy in a pretty coherent way. And that's of course by design, because we're also kind of already familiar with that history. And so we get to witness the act of history making and how it does or does not gel with what we've already ascertained. It's a very interesting construction of how to tell a narrative. And it also is tying in for me with There's Always This Here, which is very much also a combination of the personal and the more historical. It is very much Abdurraqib's personal story, growing up in the 90s in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, which features, so again, place features so heavily in this book of his and also in his previous books. And a time of specific time, but it's also broader than him. It's about basketball, but of course it's a personal history, it's a family history. The first section, called Pregame, for me feels like a Limbo. It's a countdown to the beginning of the rest of the essays. It is called Pregame after all, and it's sort of this in-betweenness. It's a book about underdogs and outcasts, but also being cool, being in the in crowd. I've been thinking a lot about the spatialness of a heaven, or of a memory, of ghosts, and the kind of temporal delineation of all of those things. There are so many ghosts in all three of the books that I'm mentioning. So anyway, those are the threads that I'm putting together. I have not finished at all. There's Always This Here. Let me know in the comments if I should try to edit and expand these notes that I've been thinking about and that I wrote about in my morning pages into a Substack article for the book club Substack, because obviously I still have some more expounding to do, and mostly some more kind of organization of my thoughts. Yes, I have so many citations, but there's only so much time. So I will leave you with that. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.